Hello everyone, welcome to the course Disability Studies in India, Historical, Social and Cultural Perspectives. So, we are talking in this module is about Indian cinema and disability, and the lecture is titled as Disability in Indian Cinema, an evolving landscape of representation, right. Before I go on talking about it, let me tell you some limitations first. This lecture has a limitation because one, I am not covering up lot of movies which has like Koshish, right. There are many movies like Koshish which have spoken about people with disabilities, challenges that they face and the problem that they encounter. But I am not giving you detailed explanation of these movies because I think that detailed explanation will take a lot of time, and I will provide you just a kind of analysis or summary which you can use in analyzing the movie that you choose. The second problem that I have experienced and I am going to tell you is this, that when you are doing research in film studies or you want to look at cinema as a text and talk about it, so make sure that you see that how it has evolved, because in pre-independence lot of movies were produced. They were all based on some other concern, nationalism, national movement, so on and so forth, talking about the sacrifices of people against British oppression. And then we have post-independence, but post-independence does not mean after 1947 all kind of movies were produced and they all were the same. That is not true. In fact, 1970s, 1980s marks very different dimensions, and these movies were more based on class, how lower class people are subordinated in the Jamidari system and they are protesting against the landlord, how they are talking against the oppressive system where they are forced to work in the field and they are becoming Badua Mazdoor, right. So, if you see, that is a change also happening because it is a more, at the time this is all going on in the politics and the culture. So, what I am trying to say that in between somewhere we see some representation of people with disabilities, and obviously the very famous movie, let us say Mother India like movies, this is all about how to eulogize the national figure of a woman, right, how a woman should be, how women should behave and what is the sacrifice a woman should do. So, it depends what kind of a movement were starting, what kind of awareness were going on, and accordingly people were creating movies, people were talking about movies. And then it was also becoming a part of a critique by people, by society and all that, right. So, it goes both ways. It is not like cinema function in isolation. Cinema very much function in relation to the society, but as our job is to also look at the evolution of the cinema, how cinema evolved, what are the important dynamics that helped in shaping cinema, all right. So, we have to think about this to understand cinema and disability. So, this is the limitation I am talking about, that when you go and see that how cinema has represented disability, so make sure that you cover up since the beginning, try to cover it up, that how it has evolved. Obviously, in one of my lectures I talked about that how disability, there are 4 types, not of disability, but 4 types the way they have represented. The one, disability as a dependent, disequilibrium, maladjustment and punishment, right. What else you can find out of except these 4 way of representation of people with disability, that has also become very significant in our study. And obviously, after the disability studies emerged, there is a disability advocacy group, there are disabled movement which tries to talk about that it is very, very harmful to project people with disability in negative image. and that led a change in representation of people with disabilities in movies. Okay. So, these are the points that you have to keep in the mind when you are doing cinematic study. And second thing that I would like to tell you before I proceed further is how you can analyze cinema with the film studies point of view. Let me give you an example. For example, when you watch a movies, you see where camera is focusing upon. Does camera focus on like entire personality of a person, like entire figure of a person, or it just focuses on the disability of a person? Because camera is not neutral, it just want to show us what we want to see, right? What we want to notice, what we want to see in our society. So, camera is also prejudiced and biased. Technology is always biased, it is not like they are neutral. So, how much focus it has shown, how much it does not zoom out the parts of the body, and what light they are represented, what are the music that we listen when the people with disabilities are represented on the stage. Why are they not always shown in the romantic relationship? You can ask these questions, and most importantly, as an audience, you ask yourself, what do you want to watch? How do you want to see people with disabilities? Like suppose if I ask you that how many of you want disabled people as a hero, as a hero who is fighting, who is romantically involved with a heroine or with actress, right? Who is participating in everyday affairs, who is working, who is taking responsibilities. So, people will say that this is not believable. It's because you never see people with disability in that light. For you, people with disabilities are always a pitiable character. For you, you just want to see them as if they are a burden on the society, dependent, right? Disequilibrium, maladjustment. So, this question is not to anyone, this question is to you. How do you want to see? How do you want to think about these characters? That is important. All right. So, it is only possible to analyze, critically analyze when we have this in mind. And as an audience, if you start opposing this kind of representation, obviously things will change, because cinema is also a way to make money, to mint money. So, if you reject that, if you reject stereotypical images about people with disabilities or about women or any marginal characters, they will never come into the forefront. They will never be discussed, they will never be talked about, they will never be analyzed. Sorry, they will never be represented in that fashion, because they would see that public has become aware about the unjust. And once public started rejecting, things will automatically change. But the truth is, we consume those images, we enjoy those images, we love those images, we want those images to keep coming so often. Right? So, we want to see those images keep coming so often. And then obviously, we both, like this audience and the cinema, they both come together to strengthen the image, stereotypical image of people with disability, and that lead to stigmatized identity of people with disability. That is a point I am making, that is a point I am talking about, all right. So, now let us look at the first slide, right. The first slide is talking about Indian cinema as one of the largest film industries globally, It holds a substantial cultural influence and has long served as a mirror reflecting societal values, norms and issues. The portrayal of disability in Indian cinema has largely been fraught with stereotypes, tokenism and limited perspectives that seldom offer an authentic representation of the experiences, challenges and identities of people with disabilities. Right? This is a point. However, the portrayal of disability has largely been fraught with stereotypes, tokenism and limited perspective that seldom offer an authentic representation of the stereotypes, challenges and identities of people with disabilities. Over the years, what we notice, Indian cinema has evolved in its portrayal of disability, transitioning from a space of a marginalization to a more nuanced, complex exploration. Right? So, the portrayal of disability in early Indian cinema was deeply shaped by cultural stereotypes and social biases that existed in the larger Indian society. Disability often appeared on screen as a metaphor, as a convenient plot device. The characters with disabilities were frequently cast as either pitiable figure or as a source of comic relief, reinforcing negative stereotypes or perception of disabled individuals as others. So, we have film like Sholay, which featured a character like Thakur with physical impairment, presented disability as a tragic or punitive, fueling social narrative that associated disability with suffering or divine retribution. You are getting my point? So, three things that you are supposed to keep in the mind, that they are appearing on a screen as a metaphor, as a convenient plot devices. Let me talk about the movie called Sholay and then you will understand by yourself. Imagine that Thakur has been killed by Gabbar. If Gabbar has killed Thakur, where will the movie lead to? What does Gabbar do in the Sholay movie? I mean, there is a very masculine images that you see. The Gabbar was caught hold by the hands of Thakur. And there is a dialogue, right? There is a very famous dialogue, कि ये हाथ लोहे का है, right? What did this line talk about? This is talking about the masculine representation of a Thakur who is capable of holding the one of the most villainous person in the movies, antagonist who is basically by Thakur. And he is quite happy, he is enjoying, right? And the way it was narrated, that the kind of hand he has, right? There are many movies where you see that these masculine images are projected and they are celebrated. I am sure that you must have noticed that when the hero appears on the first time, right, he appears on the first time on the screen as if he is it's like the image is more masculine. You are getting my point. So, that is the point I am talking about. That is where I am hitting towards. So, these are stereotypical images, and after that what happens in the movie Sholay, right? He is thinking of going home, playing with kids, with the family members, and everyone is preparing that he would come and he will play. But unfortunately, what happens that he has flew. He has flown away from the jail, and the first thing that he does, he kills all the family members of maimed who does not speak because of the loss that she has witnessed. And thereafter, he has gone crazy and he is going to hunt Gabbar, but unfortunately he got trapped and he does not kill Gabbar. Gabbar does not kill Thakur. What he does, he amputes him. He has cut his hand, right, with his sword and left him disabled. So, out of this punishment, like out of this, like all this loss that he witnessed and the kind of, right, and why does he take away the hand of a Thakur? Because this is the hand which captured Gabbar by saying that this is how it happens, right? This is how it does. So, the point what I am making is that how the masculinity performs and making a person non-masculine means living a life which has no worth, no use of that kind of a life. You cannot, like, this is useless, the life that you are living now. No point of living that life. That is why he does not kill Thakur. He leave him. Like, okay, you go live with this life, there is no point of living this life. So, this is what I am talking about, and later on what happens? So, he is living with this vengeance that there will be a time when he would be able to capture Gabbar again and he will kill him, right. So, here you see that this is an important way, like obviously there is a scene in Sholay where there is a fight and then Dharmender, as a Biru, ask for the gun which is lying on the ground, but Thakur refuses to pick that up, and then obviously it infuriates Viru and he says that if you cannot help us who are here to help you, why do you think that we should live here, but rather we are going to leave this place? And then the dramatically there is a storm, and then his blanket through which he has covered his body is uncovered, and then think about that image, right? The way people look at him as if something wrong has come up, something bizarre, something strange, as a fear, as a pity. Both figure is evolved, like pitiable figure, and a figure which has potentiality to evoke fear in the mind that of the people, that one should not be like him. Why? That's why he always cover it up. Doesn't want to show the people that he is disabled. He hides, like, remember, the concealing the identity. And then they get to know the reality and obviously feeling sympathetic and helping Thakur to get that vengeance. So, this is a point I am making, that how you see the story is proceeding, how it is going further. All right. So, this is just one movie that I picked it up just to tell you and ask you to watch it again and see that how it proceeds, how it is going on. So, think about this all plot devices, think about the way characters are represented before you, think about the tragic and comedic both elements that you see in movie Sholay, right. Let us go to the next slide, please. So, moreover, disability was rarely presented as an inherent part of character's identity. Rather, it served the story's needs either to elicit sympathy or add complexity to the protagonist's journey. In such representation, disability was used to provoke emotional reaction from the audience, right. So, disability was not presented as integral part of character's identity, but rather it is serving the story's need either to elicit sympathy or add complexity to the protagonist's journey. So, in such representation, what we see that disability was used to provoke emotional reactions from the audience, right. Emotional reactions from the audience, often without paying attention to the lived reality of the disabled character. Right. In such representation, disability was to provide emotional reaction This is the point. Like, they are projected so that a certain emotional response can be created in the audience. So, when it comes to talk about particular form of emotions, then it is a need to project people with disabilities. So, often without attention to the lived realities of the disabled character. So, this type of a portrayal reinforced ableist attitudes and a lack of agency for character with disabilities. So, this type of portrayal is reinforced ableist attitudes and lack of agency, right? Agency is not also discussed. There is an agency which shows that it is not there. For character with disabilities, reducing their identities to the presence of their impairments. So, as Indian cinema continue to grow, right, as Indian cinema continue to grow, so did its repository of disability stereotypes and tropes. What do we find? Okay, the same thing. So, one prevalent trope is the portrayal of disabled characters as superscripts or inspirational figure, right? That I have often talked about it. I have often discussed that how disabled characters are projected as superscripts or inspirational figures. So, we have a film like Koi Mil Gaya, you can see that same. There is a star called Hrithik Roshan, who is cognitively impaired, but later on he turned out to be a Superman. He is fighting, he is walking, he is running, he is no more what he was in childhood days. There is a miracle, right? You watch these movies, you will understand the context in which I am talking about it, right? And then we also have a black, which is a notable characters, which I have already discussed in detail, so I am not going to talk about it. So, who through extraordinary effort or divine intervention overcome their disabilities, right? That is what I was talking about, either in the black, or you also see in the Koi Mil Gaya that there is extraordinary effort or divine intervention to overcome their disability. So, these films, what do these films do? They brought disability into the mainstream conversation. They often portray disability as something to be transcended. They often portray disability as something to be cured, which can be problematic, right? Which, as it certainly suggests that people with disabilities should aspire to lead normal lives by overcoming their impairment, right? So, these films are talking about how disability can be brought in the mainstream conversation, but unfortunately, still they are governed by the medical model. So, it is suggesting that disabled people should aspire to lead normal life. So, this is what again I am talking about. Medical model speaks, right? You can overcome your impairment, you can be fixed, you can be cured, you can transcend. So, films have often used disability as a means to communicate moral lessons to the audience. You can do this, you can do that, one people can live. There should be a willpower, right? Self determination. So, you should have, right? These are the disabled characters are used as a symbol of resilience or patience. So, they are as a, like if they can do this, normal people can go much ahead. They can reach to the another stage altogether. Such portrayal, although potentially afflicting, places under emphasis on the disability itself rather than the individual, perpetuating the idea that disabled people must perform or prove themselves in extraordinary ways to be valued. They must perform or prove themselves in extraordinary ways to be valued. And this has unfortunately reinforced notion of able-bodied normalcy as the ideal further alienating people with disabilities by highlighting their differences rather than embracing them. So, I have been just talking about that, how we should embrace people with disability. We should not discriminate them. Let us talk about celebrating the diversity. Let us provide an inclusive space for people with disabilities. So, use the cinema as a tool to change, and also by talking and bringing new kind of films which articulate the experience of people with disability, we can modify the inner characters of people. In fact, we can teach people not to look at them as a stigmatized identity. So, with this, I would like to end my lecture here, and thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for your listening to me. Stay tuned, there are a few more to go. All right, thank you so much. Bye-bye.